There's a certain kind of promise, isn't there? It seems to echo through history.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually shows up when the world feels most dangerous, or, when the systems we count on feel like they're starting to break down.
Right.
And a figure steps forward. It could be a politician, a revolutionary, or even, in these ancient texts, a spiritual challenger.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, essentially, the system is broken. The person in charge has no idea what they're doing.
And I alone am the only thing standing between you and chaos.
Exactly.
It is a powerful hook. I mean, it plays on our deepest anxieties, but it also offers the very specific kind of relief.
What kind of relief?
The relief of surrendering responsibility to someone who claims they can handle it all.
It really is. And today, we're doing something a little different on the deep dive. We're not just looking at, say, policy papers or tech reviews.
No.
We have a stack of sources that forces us to look at this promise through two, radically different lenses. We're comparing modern geopolitical analysis of Donald Trump's rhetoric on war and peace,
With PhD-level theological dissertations on the rhetoric of the biblical Satan.
which I have to admit, when I first saw the source list, it sounded like the setup for a very controversial dinner party.
It sounds like a minefield.
It does. So before we dive in, we have to set the ground rules because the sources are very clear on this.
Right.
We aren't saying a former president is a theological villain. We are not making a moral equation here.
Right. This is a comparative rhetoric analysis. We're looking at the structure of the argument.
The machinery.
The machinery of usurpation, exactly.
Yeah.
How does a challenger try to delegitimize the ruling order, whether that's the White House or, heaven, to install themselves as the ultimate authority?
So we're calling this deep dive the architecture of hubris. And looking at the sources, we've distilled this down to three pillars that seem to hold this whole thing up.
Yeah.
We have the I alone fallacy, the trap of transactional stewardship, and then finally, the aesthetics of grandeur.
It's a fascinating study in how power is claimed and how reality is manipulated to justify that claim.
So let's start with that first pillar. The political sources in our stack, they call this counterfactual hubris. It comes up constantly in the analysis of Donald Trump's foreign policy claims.
Counterfactual, that's the key word there. It's the habit of building your authority on things that didn't happen.
So asserting control over a history that never actually existed. The quotes from the sources are pretty stark. I'm looking at one here. Trump has repeatedly said that the Russia-Ukraine war would have never happened if you were president.
Right.
He said the exact same thing about the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, that there was, and this is a quote, zero chance of it happening under his watch.
Zero chance. I mean, that is a statistically wild claim to make about the Middle East, or really about any geopolitical event with that many moving parts.
It's absolutely. But here's my question, and I think a lot of listeners might be thinking this too. Isn't that just standard political campaigning? Every candidate says, I would have done it better.
Sure.
Why do the scholars flag this as something different? Why call it hubris?
Well, it's because of the scope. Normal political rhetoric might say, my policies would have mitigated this risk, or I'd have made different strategic choices. This is something else.
What is it then?
This rhetoric claims what the sources call diplomatic omnipotence. The narrative creates a leadership vacuum. It implies that the only variable that matters in the entire geopolitical order,
The only one.
the only thing standing between war and peace is his physical presence in the Oval Office.
So it just erases everything else.
Completely. It ignores historical grievances going back centuries. It ignores economic shifts, the agency of people like Putin or Zelensky, or, the leadership of Hamas. The analysis points out that this is, and I'm quoting, conceptually incoherent because it presumes a world where history turns entirely on the personality of one man. It's just that if he is present, the will of other nations just dissolves.
It simplifies the world into a binary. I am here, so there's order. I am gone, so there is chaos.
And that simplification, that is the bridge to our theological sources. Because when you look at the great controversy papers and the analysis of Genesis and the stack, the figure of Satan uses this exact same rhetorical wedge.
It's uncanny.
It is. In these sources, Satan isn't this monster with a pitchfork running around scaring people. He's described in legal terms.
Legally.
Yes, as a prosecuting attorney. That's the root of ha-Satan in Hebrew, the accuser. And his opening move in Genesis 3 isn't a physical attack on Eve.
It's to impeach the administration.
To impeach God.
Wow.
Specifically, the stewardship of the triune God. He asks, did God really say? The theological analysis argues that his core accusation is that God is a withholder.
A withholder. Break that down for us.
Well, the argument the adversary makes is this. The current leadership is holding back the best stuff, the knowledge of good and evil, because he's insecure. He's limiting you. He doesn't want you to be like him.
So he frames the existing order as restrictive or weak or even fraudulent.
Exactly, which is a fascinating parallel.
It is. Trump's rhetoric suggests the current administration is rank, creating a vacuum for war. The satanic rhetoric suggests divine providence is restrictive, creating a vacuum where human potential is stifled.
It's the I alone fallacy. The challenger claims the system is broken, and that their intervention is the only path to real life or real peace.
You have to delegitimize the current steward to justify the usurpation.
You have to. You have to convince people that they're currently unsafe or unfulfilled and that the current guy is to blame.
And it really establishes the self as the absolute center of the universe. I remember reading in one of the essays about the psychological requirements for this. To claim I alone can fix it, you need a dismissal of complexity, that is. Well, it borders on the delusional.
Delusional, or maybe extremely calculated. The sources argue it demands a rejection of shared reality. You have to believe, or at least project the belief, that you are self-begot, to use a phrase from Milton.
That you don't rely on the system.
The system relies on you.
But if the system is broken and you've convinced everyone the current pilot is crashing the plane, you need to offer a way to fix it.
Of course.
And that brings us to the second pillar of this architecture. The sources call it transactional stewardship.
This is where the rubber meets the road. If you reject the current order, how do you govern? How do you restore this order you promised?
And the answer in both sets of sources is...
the deal.
The deal. Sounds so modern, but...
Yeah.
Let's stick with the theology for a second to see where it comes from. The classic example is the temptation in the desert.
Matthew 4 and Luke 4. This is crucial for understanding the archetype. Satan shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in an instant. The text says, in a moment of time. And the offer is explicit. All this authority I will give you if you will worship before me.
It sounds incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
Here are the keys to the car. You want to save the world? Here's the world. Just sign on the dotted line.
But look at what's being bypassed. The expert analysis notes this is a direct challenge to what they call messianic stewardship. The messianic path, the path established by the current administration, if you will,
Yes.
It involves suffering. It involves patience. It involves the cross and the slow work of redemption.
And Satan offers a shortcut.
Dominion without suffering. Authority without the messy work of sacrifice.
He's treating the world as a commodity. It's something to be traded for allegiance, not something to be healed.
And that transactional view is consistent throughout the theological profile. The sources highlight the book of Job, where the accuser asks, does Job fear God for nothing?
Right.
He literally cannot conceive of a relationship that isn't a transaction. He thinks God is buying loyalty because that's how he operates. He thinks everyone has a price.
Okay, that is an eerie setup for the political side. Because the deal is the central brand of the Trump foreign policy rhetoric. It's not just a strategy, it's an identity.
It is. And the sources specifically analyze his claim that he could end the Ukraine war in 24 hours.
Right, he says he'd get Putin and Zelensky in a room and just work it out. But again, playing devil's advocate here, pun intended, isn't a deal better than a war.
I see your point.
I mean, if he can stop the killing in 24 hours, why do political scientists call this hubris? Why is that a bad thing?
Because of the distinction the sources make between conflict management and conflict resolution. They argue that Trump conflates the two.
Okay.
A deal between strongmen might pause the shooting. That's management. But it doesn't resolve the underlying structural issues. Territorial integrity, security guarantees, justice for war crimes.
There's a Band-Aid.
It's worse than a Band-Aid. It's a bypass. Just like the offer to Jesus, take the kingdoms, skip the cross, the offer to end a war in 24 hours suggests you can skip the hard, grinding work of diplomacy.
It suggests peace isn't about shared values or law.
It's about a handshake between two guys in a back room.
It personalizes the entire fate of nations. It creates a world where international law doesn't matter, only the personal relationship between leaders.
And that's the danger one of the sources highlights. It notes that, historically, wars are rarely ended by a single leader unilaterally. When you treat international relations like a series of real estate deals, You signal to adversaries that everything is for sale.
You signal that structural commitments like NATO or treaties don't matter as much as personal rapport.
Exactly. So the deal can actually become a source of instability, not stability. It tells dictators, if you can flatter the guy in charge, you can get away with anything.
It creates a fragile peace that just hangs on the mood of the leader.
Instead of the strength of the institution, yes.
Yeah.
It's a return to a kind of feudalism, where the king's favor is the only law.
This friction between the promise of an easy fix, the 24-hour peace, and the messy reality of the world, it leads us to the third pillar. And this one is fascinating visually.
Right.
The aesthetics of grandeur versus the limits of reality.
This is all about image maintenance. If you claim you alone can fix it, and you claim it will be easy, a mere transactional reality has a nasty habit of getting in the way.
Reality is stubborn.
The sources describe Trump's narrative as, well, incredibly self-aggrandizing. To counter this, he's quoted saying, "No other president solved a war, not one war," which is historically just. It's not correct.
It's the projection of omniscience. He has to be the first, the best, the only. But the sources provide a reality check. They point to the friction between this image of the limitless leader and the actual record.
Example.
The withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal. The rhetoric was, this is the worst deal ever. I alone can fix it by leaving. The promise was a better deal and a subdued Iran.
And the reality?
The reality, according to the analysis in our stack, was that Iran accelerated its uranium enrichment after the U.S. left. The fix actually broke the containment.
Or January 6th. The rhetoric was about strength, about saving the country. But the source describes the reality as a signal of democratic fragility. The image was strength, the reality was chaos.
Right. So you have this massive gap. The rhetoric promises total control, but reality is chaotic and resistant.
Yeah.
And to bridge that gap, you have to engage in what the theological sources call moral inversion.
This gets dark.
This is the Beelzebul controversy, right?
Yes. In the Gospels, the religious leaders see Jesus doing undeniable good. He's casting out demons. He's bringing order to chaos. But it threatens their order.
So they accuse him of doing it by the power of Beelzebul, the prince of demons.
They flip the script.
The good guy is the bad guy. The healer is the destroyer.
It's an epistemological collapse.
Yeah.
They're trying to invert reality to protect their narrative. The source calls this the collapse of moral epistemology. The usurper presents himself as the true discerner of reality, even if it means calling the truth a lie.
It sounds like gaslighting, but on a cosmic scale.
It is cosmic gaslighting. It's like, don't believe your eyes, believe my voice. But the deepest parallel here, and this is the one that really stuck with me from the theological papers, is about vulnerability.
Vulnerability. I think these figures project strength. They want to look untouchable.
They project strength because they refuse to be vulnerable. That's the core of the aesthetic. Go back to the desert, the very first temptation.
Okay.
Jesus has been fasting for 40 days. He's starving. He is physically weak.
And Satan says, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread."
Think about the logic there. You are hungry. You have power. Why are you suffering? Use your power to serve yourself. Fix the problem instantly.
It's a challenge to his humanity. It's like saying gods don't starve. If you're really powerful, you shouldn't have to feel this.
Exactly. And Jesus refuses. The architecture of hubris is defined by the rejection of suffering. It demands instant, painless authority.
Don't spit bread.
War to peace in 24 hours. It rejects the limits of reality.
That is a powerful contrast. The source on the theology of the cross argues that true redemption, and maybe true political leadership too, actually requires suffering.
Right.
It requires existing within the limits of the broken world to fix it.
That is the crux of the matter. The theological sources note true redemption comes through suffering in the cross. The political sources note true peace comes through long-term negotiations, compromise, acknowledging complexity.
And hubris hates complexity.
Hubris wants the aesthetic of the strong man who never hungers, never loses, and never waits.
And to maintain that aesthetic, you have to become something ugly. The dark triad source mentions narcissism, but this feels deeper. It's a refusal to be human.
It's the refusal to be a creature. It's the desire to be the creator, to be self-begot, as Milton put it. If you acknowledge you need help, or that you can't fix it in 24 hours, you admit you are mortal.
And the usurper cannot admit mortality.
Never.
So when we pull all this together, the I alone fallacy, the transactional mindset, and this refusal of vulnerability, we're seeing a really distinct archetype. It's almost a script that gets passed down through the ages.
It's a coherent rhetorical strategy. Starts with the accusation. The current steward is incompetent. moves to the promise, I can fix it instantly because I am special.
And relies on the method. We'll bypass the rules and just make a deal.
That's the script.
And according to our sources, this is dangerous not just because it might fail, because turning stones to bread doesn't usually work in geopolitics, but because of what it does to us, the listeners.
That's the most important part. From the political side, the danger is that it simplifies complex global realities into a personal mythology. We start thinking international relations is just a reality TV show about one man.
It makes us blind to the actual threats and structures of the world.
And we become passive observers of a hero narrative instead of active citizens.
And from the theological side,
the danger is what they call a cosmic lie. It tries to convince us that the only way to be safe is to abandon trust in the system or in God and just submit to the strong man who promises bread and kingdoms.
It tempts us to trade our freedom for a sense of security.
It does. It collapses our ability to discern truth because it makes the self of the leader the only standard of reality. If he says it, it's true, even if the stones are still stones.
Even if the war is still raging.
A very old argument. And usually, historically and theologically, that argument leads to a fall. Hubris is the pride that comes before the destruction.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. It's from that Theology of the Cross source. It's a challenge to how we normally look at leadership, especially in, election cycles or times of crisis.
It is. We are wired to want the strong man. We crave the simple solution. We want the person who says they can fix it in 24 hours.
It's a seductive promise.
Very.
But the source suggests that true stewardship, real leadership, is proved not by projecting limitless power, but by the willingness to endure suffering and complexity for the sake of other people.
Hubris claims it can bypass the struggle. It claims it can jump from the top of the temple and float. But history and theology suggest the only way to actually fix anything is to walk through the struggle.
There are no shortcuts.
No shortcuts to redemption and no shortcuts to peace.
Something to chew on the next time you hear a promise that sounds just a little too good to be true. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
See you next time.